Welcome back, everybody. Said we were going to start in 2 minutes, but I'm just too impatient. Our guest today deserves all the time that we can possibly give to have her on. So we want to make sure that we have tons of time. I know that you're going to have questions. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. Happy Friday, by the way. Welcome to the weekend. You are getting ready to coast into a weekend. And if you're in the United States, you're getting ready to go into a long weekend, hopefully, with Memorial Day on Monday. So hopefully that means that you get some good fun outside, some riding, running, whatever it is that you do, as weather is now pretty much primo across the US at least. So one thing that I have to plug here before we kind of move on is Sufferfest. Down in the description below, all that information is there. If you're not currently a subscriber, check it out. We're going to talk a little bit today about mental health and performance. That'll be part of the conversation we have. And Suf has some really good mental strengthening sort of plans in there as well, just to make you kind of resilient and kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, kind of learn to accept some of the suffering that comes with endurance sport. And we're going to talk with, to kind of introduce who we're going to have on today, and has a really unique perspective on mental health and performance, racing, and being kind of dynamic with her disciplines of being on the bike. Is we have Miss Sarah Sturm will be joining us today. She's back from our workout on Monday with Coach Neal after she is apparently on a rest week. We put her through the ringer on Monday. So she is definitely on a rest week the rest of this week. So we're going to catch up with her in just a few minutes. But until then, let's go ahead and bring the Honorable Coach Neal on. Hey, Neal, how are you?
I'm doing well, Matt. Good to see you.
You ready to head into the weekend? You got some big plans?
It is, let's see. Well, it is a big weekend. Looking forward to, actually, I'm going to tone it down this weekend. Last weekend, I went kind of big. The following weekend, May 30th, I'm planning on doing a 100-mile mountain bike ride.
Right.
Couple friends. So this week I'm gonna try to dial it down a little bit and save something for the next week. So we'll see how that goes. I went out on Wednesday and rode a few laps while Ruth Winder was doing her Everesting on Flagstaff. I rode it 4 times, which I had plans on doing it 5 times just to kind of like get a feel. It was about 15 times like to do the full Everesting. And it was hot and windy, and I was absolutely smoked at number 4. And that's also when Caley Fretz just pulled the pin. He was sitting at the top, and I talked with him. I was like, yeah, okay, I guess I feel okay. Like he had done 9 laps.
9, yeah.
He was toast.
That,
and Ruth.
That's quite Ruth the trend right now. That's quite the trend.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. You know, based on my Wednesday experience, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I actually want to do that. Really.
Yeah. Well, I keep telling people all you really need to go do is go to YouTube, look up Phil Guyman and his most recent effort, and just look at the thumbnail of that effort of him, and that gives you all you need to know. Like you're like, I never do I want to do that. So much less doing an elevation like you guys are at. That's a completely different thing. And Flagstaff has got some really steep pitches. Were you guys going all the way up to all
the way to the mailboxes? To the mailboxes.
To the mailboxes.
So 7K basically per lap, and 600 meters each lap. So it's it leaves a mark.
Well,
I didn't have enough gearing. I didn't have right gearing to do it more times. Should have chosen.
Speaking of mental
wisely.
kind of mental and how it plays into performance, I mean that kind of effort is a lot of mental. I mean it's physical as well, but it is just accepting that sort of that work. Well, that's cool. So, hey, real quickly though, next week we have on Memorial Day, if you're here in the States, we have Fabian Cancellara joining us for a workout, which that should be fun. We're going to actually have his power data and everything up on screen. So that'll be fun. The
Next
legend.
Level. Next level.
Yeah, I told him he's got to bring his A game. You know, I got to bring classics kind of.
We've got the right workout for him.
I know. I noticed.
Very Dark Place features him actually in some racing. So
that's gonna be a lot of fun. And then of course we're gonna have him back on next Friday for Q&A, just like we're gonna have with Sarah right now. But not to belabor the point, let's go ahead and bring Sarah on and get into this. Sarah, good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
Welcome back. Are you recovered from your workout on Monday?
Oh yeah, just nothing. A little cold shower couldn't fix. I noticed that Neal, the numbers behind you were flapping, and I was like, he has a fan. That was smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we need to get you a headwind.
Get the headwind. Yeah.
Smart one.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but I needed to just scoot the whole setup out of my garage so there's some breeze.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But no, it was great. I had a good time. I'm really after the ride with you. The next day, I led a ride on Zwift with Stetna, and it was super fun, but way harder than my dad. Of course, he's super into numbers and has been doing smart trainer stuff a lot longer than I have, and he was like, wow, you went a lot harder than you probably thought you were.
I think the biggest thing about those rides, which really to some degree turn into races, is they just go hard right out of the gate.
I know
there's no just oh, let's ride.
Totally. Pete told me that was going to happen, and I was like, well, it'll be fine. But I'm like, I'll be damned if these dudes think they can ride away from me. And I was just had the head tilt down.
Yeah.
You're in.
Trying to talk at the same time. Yeah, it was actually I texted. Well, we also found out that Pete and my boyfriend had raced mountain bikes together way back in the day. But it was a fun experience. I'm actually I can see, especially right now, how the group kind of social but not social riding can be awesome for folks.
Yeah, and I think really you just any kind of connection you can get right now, right?
Yeah,
is good.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, even mentally, it just makes you feel good to be like, oh, I'm rubbing elbows, virtually with someone and handlebars, and it's a little bit
or
of
just knowing that you're gonna meet at a certain time, and that's why I asked my coach for a training plan finally, because I was like, I think I actually need some structure in my life, which I never say, but it's been helpful. It helps a lot right now because everything is so crazy.
Hey, real quick, I heard a story, and I don't know if I heard it from you or I read it somewhere, about your dad. Well, it was about you, but it included your dad, and something about you grew up in New Mexico, right?
Uh-huh.
Something about a time trial and how he zip tied or something like that. Or I don't know if you told me that. What is that story?
I don't know. Might have been on Floyd's of Leadville. They did an interview. I don't know, but way back in the day, my first and last tandem ride.
It was
my
tandem.
dad.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I think I was 9 or something. I looked like a little boy, more so than I do now. And he put me in the back of the tandem, but I wasn't tall enough to reach the pedals, so he zip tied my feet to wooden blocks.
Oh man.
And then he clipped them in. But I think we have a state time trial championship.
Wait, you guys won.
Tandem.
Is it at the Moriarty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I just remember the sunflowers and getting sweat on and spit on by my dad. And I was like, cool, cycling sucks.
Wow.
Yeah, because you came from the swim soccer background. And so that was like a, hey, I'm going to drag you along for the weekend and you're going to come do this with me. That's awesome.
I mean, I will admit, I'm sure I'm competitive, and I'm sure that ran deep inside of me, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, whoa, that is not fun at all. And then my sister and I just did I think it was called Spike's Ride. It was through the Natural History Museum, and we would collect a bunch of Beanie Babies on our helmets and do this ride. And that was the rest of my cycling until I went to college.
Took a little time till you came back.
Took a little time.
You had to wipe all the spit and the sweat off. Took you that long to get
God. Yeah. Seriously, I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
You couldn't pay me enough.
I'll let you guys get into it, but I think something that would be really interesting to hear about, especially with it being, mental health, awareness month. And we've talked with you, on the Breakfast with Boz podcast about this. And I think we've probably caught up. I know personally, you and I have talked about it at length, of just the importance of having, kind of a mental health kind of strategy and plan in place, not just, for performance, but to just kind of be a overall healthy individual, and just to sort of normalize that a bit. So I want to, give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit of your story with mental health and kind of how you approach that and how it impacts performance. And then Neal, I think you probably have some very good background with dealing with elite level athletes and kind of the mental health side of coaching that comes with that. So I think that'd be really interesting to hear about. One thing I will say to all the viewers out there is, if you have questions, go ahead and ask those in the comments section, and I will get those queued up for Sarah and Neal to answer. And I'll catch you guys here in a little while. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. All right, Sarah. Well, good to be with you again here on a Friday morning, later end of the week, getting ready for a weekend. So as Matt mentioned, there's an aspect of taking care of your mental health that goes beyond just like the performance side. So in some cases, we think of like sports psychology and the performance side of things, and positive self-talk and things like that. But there's a different realm too. What's your kind of take and your feelings and thoughts on addressing mental health from maybe both of those perspectives, or
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think I first kind of like to start with like talking about like the terminology too, because there's like a weird stigma, especially for men. I'm just going to name that with like the term mental health. I think people think mental illness right away, and you have to have like a mental illness to address mental health or something like that. But I kind of, sorry, there's a street sweeper going by, so it's a little loud.
Okay.
Just wait for a second. Moving quite slow.
Scrubbing hard right now.
Come on. We got this interview to do, buddy.
Yeah, the garbage truck has already come by once here.
Yeah.
So.
Totally. So I kind of like, the reason I'm really transparent about it is because I think it's something that everyone should address, because it's a part of health. It's a part of your overall health. I wish we lived in a place where mental health care was super easily accessible and affordable. Maybe someday, but I can follow up the whole discussion with some resources that I've been promoting, affordable ones and that sort of thing, and accessible. But my path with mental health and keeping up with it rather is that I started seeing a therapist or a counselor when I was in college. And then as I started getting more and more serious about cycling, I actually worked with like a specific sports psychologist. And just through the years, I kind of have switched a couple of things around. Just I wasn't meshing with those people perfectly. It's like a relationship. And I have been working with the same woman for 4 years now here in town. Luckily in Durango, she also used to be a professional bike racer, which is very helpful and very unique. And I recognize that is something that I feel very lucky for. Street sweeper again, coming back by. I don't know if you can hear it.
I can just hear a little beep, very, very little.
Okay, good. I'll just talk through it. But yeah, so I have been working with this woman, and we obviously, like, she understands kind of my life of this like stressful, anxiety-ridden profession of being a cyclist, an athlete. And then she also understands the other piece, which is just being a normal human and keeping up with your just daily mental health. And I'll see a couple times a month. And I have noticed on the days where I'm like, man, I feel like totally okay. I don't really have anything to talk about. Like, I'm not stressed. I'll still meet with her and I'm like, oh my God, who knew? I needed to work on this like whole other thing. And it doesn't have to be clinical. It's just it's a neutral relationship in your life. And for me, I actually quit racing because it wasn't fun anymore, and a lot of reasons. And I came back, and I think a big part of my success recently has been the work that I've done in my brain versus the physical training.
Yeah, and it's a whole package. I mean, one other thing to think about is like at you've had some pretty significant accomplishments on the bike, and balancing those things, like, does like having a good performance like make that stuff go away, or does it sometimes amplify? Like in your experience, like, again, sometimes we see, when somebody's doing well, everything has got to be great, right? But is that necessarily, is that your experience?
No. It's like the opposite. I work with my coach, who I feel like I kind of have two therapists in some ways, like my mental health therapist, like mental health professional. And then my coach, most of the time we just talk about like, the psychological approach to racing. And we actually yesterday just had this awesome conversation about like, I really like being the dark horse. Like I loved showing up for races and lined up in the very back, and like, because if I didn't do well, then no one would know.
No worries. Yeah.
But and I'm excited to kind of connect with some people on this, but I've found more stress with like this whole defending champion thing.
Yeah, because I mean, you won Belgian Waffle Ride last year.
Yes.
You won cyclocross national single speed a couple times.
Yeah, that was a big test for me. This year was really stressful. I was probably the most nervous someone has ever been in jean shorts.
Super stressed out in the jorts.
Oh my God, on the trainer, I was like, holy shit, I am defending champion of the single speed race, and I get really nervous for cross anyway. And yeah, it was really hard. And honestly, like I had some mixed emotions about Belgian Waffle Ride this year anyway. And then with the pandemic and it getting postponed, and it's hard to approach racing. Like there's a lot of layers, and it's hard for me to be the defending champion. And I don't know how these other athletes manage that. I would love any information.
One thing that with athletes that I work with, one thing we say, like every race you start, everyone's starting at the same point. Like regardless of what you've done on that day, that's it. Like you are where you're at, and that's, regardless of what you have or haven't done, it's now time to go and execute what you can. It is harder in a lot of cases. We do say, it's easier to have a first time good performance, but then to repeat that when there is some of that pressure and expectation, which most cases we take that on ourselves. We add that pressure ourselves. We, make all those things more elevated. And so finding a way to be able to get yourself to that same kind of mental place and not put that burden on you before the start line. Again, starting it clean. The race starts. Doesn't matter how much or how little you've trained, how well or poorly it's gone. Like it's fresh. It's go. Like now it's do what you can and adapt and adjust. That's the way I kind of think about, and talk about, that type of thing, but generally to a degree, it does feel better usually having that, when you do it once you've had success and you repeat it, you're like, okay, I can do that. I can manage all that stuff. And that should give you some confidence.
Totally. That's absolutely in line with, before my second national cyclocross championship weekend, I worked really hard with my therapist to figure out kind of ways to manage the anxiety and stress. I had kind of an upsetting showing at Single Speed Worlds, which is like a crazy race to get like it, we could spend this whole podcast talking about that. Well, I have actually talked about that with anyway, but that was my like one other like proof for myself of like, okay, that's how I did. And I got third in this race that I really wanted to win. And we actually came up with a mantra, which I find super calming when I'm like in the thick of like these nerves and this anxiety. And like, I mean, it can trigger a lot of stuff for us. I mean, that sort of stress. I don't look at any of the information that my Whoop tells me at all that week, because it's probably just garbage.
Irrelevant.
It's like, oh, you're really stressed. You're not recovered at all. Like you had a lot more alcohol than you usually have. But yeah, I would come up with kind of a mantra of like, it was something along the lines of like, you're here now, like just ride your best, like do your best today in this moment. And like, I find that like super calming, and that it takes a lot of work. You can't just like sit there and like tell yourself these things. Like it takes like it takes sitting across from another person and talking, like truly like saying the things out loud that cause stress and anxiety for you to another human being that responds. That's a very unique relationship. Yeah,
definitely. We have a question here from Peter Kuntz.
Oh, cool.
And yes, the relationship with a practitioner that understands the importance of sport seems critical. I'm curious if there's some sort of accreditation that is available for sports psychologists and coaches. I can tell you, like, so I think of, in there's kind of two different realms here a bit. There is the clinical aspect and working with someone who is a licensed mental health professional, and that side of things. And then there is the performance side of things, which there may be an individual who is a licensed mental health professional who has also that level of experience and knowledge within the sports realm, but you don't necessarily always have both sides of that. And so I've had athletes that have their clinical therapist that they work with, and then they also have a sports performance person that they work with. And so those sometimes, in a rare situation, I think you may be in one of those where you have that licensed clinical person who also has that experience, but then you can also have somebody who does work really in the performance realm. And so again, there's more. I'd have to look in American Psychological Association exactly what those are, but
there's some accreditations. Like you can find somebody who is a clinical like sports psychologist. But I will say, like, I'll preface this whole conversation with, you have to kind of try it out and see if that's actually what you need. Even if, you find, so say there's like a therapist that's just, your average mental health professional. They have, the proper accreditations of that career path. And then you have someone who's a sports psychologist and they kind of maybe dip a toe into both. Even if you're an avid cyclist and you race, that person might not be the right one for you. I actually worked with a sports psychologist specifically, and they helped me quit cycling. And then after that, I just felt like I, kind of moved in a different direction for a little bit and found someone else that kind of like fit with who I was. It just kind of depends on who you are and the person that you kind of fit with. I think Psychology Today, that website, you can like filter by where you live and then like your insurance. And I'm not sure, we can maybe look up after this to see if you can kind of choose like what layer of therapist you're looking for, but that's a great resource too.
Yeah, and different therapists use different techniques. There are certain kinds, in a way.
Right.
In a way, yeah. So it's like nutrition and dietitian. There's different things. So a registered dietitian is somebody who is a licensed, like they've done a certain amount of study, clinical practice, et cetera, versus like nutritionist is a little bit more of a catch-all term. So within sports psychology and then clinical psychology, there is, kind of those differences in what.
Right.
So make sure you read into what that background is and what is
Yeah.
associated, make sure you're, that you understand where their expertise is and what they're able to do.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, this is a little far from the question, but I think the common thread with all of these relationships that you can have as an athlete or as a human or whatever, but like a dietitian, a therapist, even like a PT,
Yeah.
a coach is a great role, but all of this is a part of like what I call like a support system, and I think having that like kind of a professional relationship. Obviously, don't go to your PT and tell them all of your problems.
Yeah.
But all of these people are there for like to help you out, and I think especially right now, we're all really stressed out. It's helpful to feel like you have some support from people, and you kind of have to just put yourself out there a little bit. And that's the first step, is kind of just making those connections yourself. But there's a lot of resources out there too.
Yeah, and I find, overtime athletes that tend to have more success, they have a good support team. And so for me, like as a coach, I tell other coaches, like the better coaches are resource managers who find other people who can help. Like as a coach, I can't do every element of what an athlete needs to perform well. Like there's certain areas that I have more expertise and a little bit more, but I will refer for sure and bring other people into that fold. I had an athlete, she was a master's mountain bike racer and was, very, very good. She had been on the podium at the World Championships, but she had never won, and that was one of her goals. And we worked on different things in training, and she had therapists that she worked with, from the mental health angle. She had, physical, she had physical therapists that she worked with for different things just to address some of these needs. But one of the things after a little while, I was like, wow, we really need somebody to work on her technical skills. And she lived out, wasn't in local Boulder, so I didn't get to go out and ride with her. And again, there are people who are better at teaching those specific mountain bike skills than me. And I found somebody who was a really good resource. And ultimately, at the top of her age group, she won the World Championship, like at the highest, which normally in masters racing, like you try to get it when you're at the bottom, because as you age at that point, there's typically a little bit of a decline. But she won at the very top of her age group, and it was a combination of a lot of things. But the skill set that she had developed, like she actually won really on the descent more than on the climb, and so. Being able to put those pieces together and know that you need others to help. Like you can't take it all on as a coach or as an athlete. Like don't be afraid to look for other resources. And if you have a coach who says, no, you don't need anyone else to help you, you might want to consider, talk to them again and be like, are you sure? It wouldn't be helpful to work with this person. If they're like, no, it's I can do everything. I would consider looking around, because they're probably they don't have your best interest in mind.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And it's, it's part of the reason I really have loved working with a coach, or, a mentor is a really great role as well. Like if you're not able to find a mental health professional, just be wary. Like there are some people that are trained professionally to like give advice. And then there's also like counseling and mediation and mentorship, like all of those pieces. I think as athletes, we're kind of lucky because we get that with a coach a lot of the times. I've always had those relationships with my coaches. They're there as my support system. And most of the time, this is probably me as the common denominator, but they're like partial therapists also.
It's a skill set required. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge part of bike racing. I mean, that went into a lot of BWR for me.
Yeah.
I was like way underprepared physically. I mean, I wouldn't say off the couch, but pretty dang close.
Yeah. So this is last year's Belgian Waffle Ride, right?
Yeah.
So it was, what is it, April, May time of year?
Yeah, it was like the beginning of May, which is, it was like crazy.
And you're coming out of Durango, right?
Yeah. It was like a huge snow year. It was like coming off of my first pro cross season, and I took the off season very seriously. I like skied a bunch.
Off.
I mean, I was, yeah, totally. I was active. Like I was Nordic skiing a bit, but like with my dog, you know, I wasn't like doing intervals or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could do intervals on Nordic skis. But yeah, I don't know. Like I was really excited. My team manager like asked me if I wanted to do the Belgian Waffle Ride, and at first I was like, "Oh, it's like a fondo, like you get to eat waffles."
Sounds fun. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, "It's a gravel ride, but here's a Roubaix, which is like a road bike." And I was like, "What the hell are you signing me up for?" And then I kind of did some research and figured out that it was like 137 miles.
Pretty long.
Pretty long.
What's the longest ride you'd ever done prior to that?
Oh, 100 miles.
Okay.
Like years before.
So this is like, yep, stepping up a good
bit.
But
totally. And so I was like, oh, well, this is a cool, I mean, during my off season, I catch up on all of my reading, and I had read this book called Endure. I'm sure you've heard of it. By Alex Hutchinson. And I was so fascinated by the part of like your internal governor, and basically like what you're actually capable of versus what your brain lets you be capable of. And I was like, all right, I can show up for this race and like line up, like I'm just going to race my hardest. And I don't train or race. I don't do the power thing.
It's just race.
Yeah, I've never, I don't know what those numbers are. And my coach kind of gave me some nutrition advice, which was the peanut butter and jelly sandwich thing and potato chips. And then he was like, hey, don't get your heart rate over 150. And I pretty much kept it at like 164 the whole time.
For other people.
Yeah, I was an art major. I'm not good with numbers.
Hot day, anxiety, race situation, heart rate is going to be higher than you would expect.
I mean, well, totally. I mean,
prospect to your perceived effort, right?
Yeah. I felt good. I did the thing where what I always do, which is go out super hard. But I went out really hard because I thought I was losing, and then I just kept going hard. I don't know. It was like that. You know those rides that like you just kind of feel good the whole time.
Flow. You're in one of those like peak experiences where it's just like that's those are great days. Yeah.
It was.
I'd say that was my 2019 experience also, BWR.
Yeah.
I got a question for you though, because and I'm sorry to just jump in, but but around 2019 BWR, so you and I were talking at one point, and you didn't realize you were in the lead, right?
No, God, no.
You were like, "Oh, I'm losing."
Yeah.
And at what point did you actually find out you were in the lead?
I caught my teammate Cody Kaiser, who's a very, very fast
good rider. Yeah.
Bike racer, and I was like, "Oh shit, I might actually be doing pretty well."
It might be
and
okay.
I haven't seen any other women, so either these like ladies are insanely fast, and like I really am not out of shape. Like I felt like I was going pretty hard, but like I kind of figured I would be in the top pack and see somebody, like some other woman in front of me or behind me, and I hadn't seen a single other female, and I don't know, you have like that weird racer brain, and you're like, weird, that's weird, crazy, I should probably drink, and okay, let's try and eat out of my like huge pocket that's been twisted around, and you know, everything was very unprofessional per usual.
But it worked.
With me. Yeah.
But when you ticked over that 100-mile mark, which there's something like psychological, right? There's like it's like you hadn't gone further than that in the past, so it was uncharted territory. So totally. I think like what's interesting to me, and maybe Neal, you have some perspective on this as well, but it's like, did that feel freeing for you, or was that like daunting? You're like, okay, this is like now straight up adventure. Who knows what's gonna happen? Or totally. Oh shit, like I have no idea what's gonna happen between now and the finish.
I mean, there's always that, like, you know, as you creep closer and closer to the finish. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm definitely winning. And I was like, I just don't want to get second.
I don't want to give this up.
I really don't. And I knew, like, thank goodness I had showed up and had this, like, amazing group of people around me. Allison Tetrick, my teammate, she had done it a couple of times and for some reason hates Belgian Waffle Ride. She, like, always has an awful crash or something terrible. And she had given me a lot of beta based on the course, like, just like, all right, you're going to finish. Let's go ride the finish of this thing. And you can see this hill you have to climb up. And if there's ever a time, like, this is why I always struggled with, like, cross-country mountain bike racing, because the finish line was always at the bottom of the descent, not the, like, climb, you know, like, yeah, totally. So I was like, all right, I know if I can get to that hill, even if someone is near me, I am just going to, like, destroy myself. And then there was, like, this whole, like, finish. I mean, Matt, you've done it. Neal, I'm not sure if you've done BWR yet, but there's, like, it's this, like, rolling descent. And then you, like, zigzag through these neighborhoods for, like, honestly, it felt like 200 miles, like, the last 10 minutes. And
tell me about it.
Yeah. But it's like what your mind goes through in those sorts of events, especially if you're winning, like, it's a weird, amazing feeling to be, like, winning, and then, like, the last second when you're like, all right, I'm actually gonna win this thing, like, that is, like, I think it's the guy who owns Scratch Labs, what's his name? Alan. Yeah, he has this whole 99 versus 1 per, like, that whole thing of, like, we chase that, like, feeling, that, like, that headspace, that, like, emotion of, like, oh my God, glory, and, like, or I accomplished this. Like, when I did my first 100-mile race, it was in Telluride, the Telluride 100 mountain bike race, and that's a hard
gnarly
race. And finishing, I mean, I, like, that was one, like, years ago that I signed up for, just trying to finish. And, like, the feeling that, like, that 1% is, like, the thing that you're chasing. And I love that, because there's so many other moments that are so brutal that, like, physically or emotionally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. A lot of times,
and then my life was different.
Yeah. I always say, like, with endurance sports, like, in the beginning, like, in an event, especially, like, you have a little bit of, like, up and down, like, with, like, mental, how you're feeling physically, all that. And then as it goes longer, the highs often get higher, the lows definitely get lower. And you get to this point where when you're really low, I always tell people, like, the place it is going to go, like, at some point it will go back up. Those highs, when you get up there, then are even higher. And so when you're down low, you just got to, like, 1 foot, you know, just keep pedaling, you know, just keep moving forward, and don't dwell where you're at. Just keep moving. You're going to get to that next place. You're going to climb up to another high, and just got to stay on it, and know that when you're hitting those low points, you're near those high points too. That's just
like
art,
making me like,
I know. I
just thinking about it.
I feel like I've totally just identified with that.
Totally. I think that's
you have to embrace. You have to embrace that point, because it's part of it. It's expected. You know, it's not like you don't run away from it, right? It's like when you're going hard in it, you know, you have these different sensations. You know, I always say, you know, whatever you can call it, pain and this and that and suffering, but those are different sensations, and actually, like, feed into them rather than, like, try to avoid them. You're going to have more success. Learn how to get there and stay there, you know, rather than avoid it.
I mean, I think it's interesting, because sport, in a lot of ways, and it's endurance sport is a big metaphor for this, is like, you know, it makes you resilient, for one, but you can't escape it. You know what I mean? There's, like, these very, like, black and white decisions. You know what I mean? Like, there's very little room for gray. It's like, you either accept the pain, accept the suffering, or you don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And, like, throw the towel in. It's like this, like, very, like, concrete sort of, like, almost takes you back to a survival mentality, of just like do or don't. These are the consequences.
Yeah.
And then like you come out the other side, if you push through it, you come out the other side so much more resilient. And I mean, like Sarah, like you've been practicing that for years now, is like, coming out the other side. And like, I think it's interesting because I think you're in a really unique window, and you kind of alluded to it, is like now you're in a place of like winning, and winning like bigger races and having some like kind of results in that area. And now you're being faced with like a different type of challenge. Like, do I accept this challenge of like the pressure that comes with, winning, and the expectations that even if you're not putting them on yourself, just people, they just do. I can see you right now. You're like, don't tell me that.
No, it's okay. I got a good support system. You can say whatever you want. We'll discuss it later in my therapy.
We'll process this. Exactly. We're gonna have to post-process.
But I mean, I think it is
totally,
interesting because now you're in a whole nother place, right? And like, but this is a challenge. It's not like, how do I overcome that? So
it's something. I had this awesome conversation with my coach Rotem, who's been a friend of mine. He was at Fort Lewis College with me, and he's an awesome guy. He's very well learned in the exercise science side of things, and he also understands me as a human and this like non-traditional athlete that I have pushed myself on his like coaching plate. But I wanted to talk about this a little bit just with the pandemic, and I'm assuming a lot of people listening are probably athletes and probably cyclists and are probably struggling with the fact that we have had a lot of the ways that we can test ourselves taken away, which is probably why we're seeing this whole Everesting stuff happen. People are trying to find new ways to challenge themselves. And, at first I was like, oh my God, people are just exploiting this, this new like trend of like climbing an absurd amount. And I was kind of conflicted, and like, they're just trying to stay relevant as an athlete right now because we don't have races. But I don't think that's it at all. I actually think that people like us that are athletically driven or just, driven people, we're like, working super hard or have worked super hard and have had all of those tests taken away from us, and that's something that as athletes, it's such a cool thing to have. Like, if you didn't have athletics, like it's really hard to get a check-in in your life. Like, I used to love getting my annual reviews because I was like, tell me how I'm doing. Like, tell me all the things I need to work on. Like, I loved it. And then when I got more into racing and sports, it's like, God, that's such a cool opportunity. And right now it's really hard because we don't have that. And so you have to be extra motivated to create that for yourself and then push yourself to try to achieve it. Definitely. I don't know, Neal, I'm sure you have a lot on that.
I mean, finding purpose, and sometimes creating purpose, like when there are events, in a way, like you can select yourself into like a channel and then devote to that with a group of like-minded individuals. You're going to show up on that day at the start line, and you're going to have, hundreds, in some cases, thousands of people that have like also made that kind of like purposeful selection to like go out and test themselves in that time and place and space on that day. We have a lot less of that, almost, hardly any of that now. And so it's finding now different things to motivate you and find purpose, and targeting and testing yourselves. Like, all of those are things that, for people who are driven, motivated, etc., we're having to do it in a totally non-traditional way right now. And so whether that's, some people doing, more stuff like e-racing, okay, that fills the niche for some. For me, that's not super motivating, especially like being at altitude. It's like, well, this is not fair. I'm not really enjoying this at all. Like, I've done a bunch of them and trying to see. I was like, is it just like the format that I don't like, or is it just things like I haven't found the joy in doing that. And I'm a pretty competitive person. I like races and I like connecting with people and having that test. So I've set out little goals of things I want to try to do every few weeks this summer. And so there's little pieces I'm just breaking it into because I don't have that same true like race environment that I'm, used to being able to, I'm a guy who can race, I mean, this is a very small selection of my race numbers. I love just competing and being out there in different ways, different types of events. And so all of those elements are just gone. So it's now redirecting and finding purpose and continuing to do things. I love doing it, but still I want to have it check a little bit in some way.
Right.
So Sarah, I think, as we kind of close out here, so how are you kind of taking what you just said and what Neal just said as well? Like, so what are you doing then? Like how are you finding purpose?
Well, I am actually, this will be super exciting, but I'm in the process of, truly as of yesterday, I had this long talk with Rotem about figuring out something that's meaningful for me, that is very, very challenging, in some way, physically, mentally, and I'm going to try and do it. And he was like, we need to make it very hard, because honestly, if you fail, that's almost a success. And I was like, oh my God.
Limit.
So
that's when you're like, is he my coach or is he my therapist? Because that is like really good. Like,
I know Rotem is awesome. He knows, he knows me. Cause I was like, that's so crazy. Like I was thinking about doing the Colorado Trail. I've actually never camped alone. I am absolutely terrified of camping alone. There are some badass women and men who do the Colorado Trail race, and that's it. I don't know if I want to do the CTR, and like Lyell, she is someone who can just be extremely sleep deprived. I feel like those challenges are kind of more about sleep deprivation, but all this to say, I am figuring out something that is meaningful for me, that might involve an FKT plus a bit of solo camping.
Oh, I like it.
There you go.
You kind of put it out there now. So
I know. This is the first time anyone's hearing this. It just happened yesterday. I haven't pieced together exactly what it's going to be, but in the next couple months, I will be setting out to achieve my own, which totally is like, there's no dark horse there. Like you can't hide from yourself. I know I'm there. So dang it.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Maybe for you guys.
Awesome. No, I think it's awesome. I mean,
it is going to be cool. I'm really excited about it. I needed something that is controllable for me to look forward to and push myself, just in line with everything that we've talked about. And Neal, I feel like I want you to just write down what you said, and we can all print it on a little like sticker for our top tube and just read it.
Yep.
It's awesome. Like I love that. The highs are high and the lows are low, and the more you do it, the more extreme it gets.
Yep. The bigger they go.
And the closer you get to the next high.
I want to talk to defending world. I don't even know how you would go into another world championship after being the defending champion.
You have to break it into the process, and that's it is harder to repeat, I would say, but it's one of those things. You break it into the pieces, and that's it. It's honestly finding that process that works for you, repeating the bits that do, eliminating the things that don't help you. And
how do you know?
That's journal what you've done and how you know, like where those positives are. Those are all, finding those pieces. When Taylor Phinney won his first elite world title on the track, Connie, his mom, pretty successful, Olympic gold medalist, etc., world champion. She's like, this is liquid gold. You have to write down all the things that you did in the lead up to this that got you to this point. Like, what did you find that gave you that value, that confidence, that capacity? And repeat those pieces that are important. It doesn't mean that you do the exact same every time, but there's certain elements that are included.
Yeah, you can kind of piece it out. And seeing something written down, it's so different and it's so helpful. You see a lot of little like, you know, glimpses into the inner workings of your own brain.
I can tell you, typing is not a creative process.
For sure.
Yeah.
Writing
totally
helps tie more things in. So
no doubt
don't be
about
afraid
it.
to pull out a pen and, you know.
I think a lot of people have to go find a pen these days.
Exactly.
And like paper.
And then actual paper, like maybe altogether, like a notebook. You know?
Yeah.
I'm somebody who, I have a notebook and I write notes and information and jot things down, and that's for sure. You know, I mean, I have my first 10 years of training logs that I keep in my office that are there stacked. Like now everything's, you know, electronic, but I keep all of those in reference. Like when I turned professional in triathlon, I went back and like, what were my, you know, 10 best races? And I took 5 bad races and looked at things that I did before those in the weeks leading up, and what were the similar themes, and repeating things that tended to be good. And definitely I found a few things, definitely don't be doing this, you know, in the week up leading up, because I've had consistently bad results. So it's kind of like finding out those pieces, and you can do that like with an electronic training log to a degree now, like searching keywords. As long as you write in what you did and how you felt, you don't need, you know, the 20-page long, you know, written every detail, but like the key things. And then those keyword searches can help you find what works well and what's worth repeating and what can be avoided.
So basically what we can take away from this conversation is have a support system.
Yes.
You know, when you challenge yourself, the lows are just the step in the process and getting closer to the highs.
Accept them.
Document your journey, you know, one way or another. And I think, and I'll plug this in, we didn't overtly say this, but, you know, find ways to challenge yourself, especially in this time. Find ways to challenge yourself and put yourself in an uncomfortable position to continue to grow. I think that those are some really solid takeaways, and probably the deepest we've gotten on our Friday chat, which this has been a lot of fun. It's always like this with you, Sarah. I have so much fun with these conversations.
Good. I'm like, guys, made it too
No, it's awesome.
It was great.
But I wanted to give you an opportunity real quickly. You're getting ready. Are you getting ready to do, I think I saw something, are you going to be doing some takeovers, some discussions with some of your other sponsors around some of the same kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's so funny. This week, I guess there was like some like sponsorship like vibe out in the, like literally everyone was like, let's talk about it. So actually today at 3, well, I've been doing a takeover with Topo Designs, this awesome Colorado company. They were like, yes, let's talk about mental health. Let's normalize it. And that's a cool group of people, because it's kind of the like urban shredder riders, like some cyclocross followers, but then just like, you know, I don't want to say normal people, like climbers, you know, other sports. It's a little bit different. I've gotten some really awesome feedback from that. So today actually is my like mental health talking day. Today at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, I'll be chatting with those guys for another Q&A. And I actually, you know, this has all kind of inspired me and motivated me to be even more vocal about it. Just, you know, social media is tough, and like right now we're all on it so much more. And it can be a double-edged sword for sure. Like you know, when you see people like posting about like, oh, I'm doing the Everesting thing, or like I'm doing this crazy challenge, and you're just in like a depressive state, like that is so brutal, on top of, you know, being quarantined and alone. So like just take it in little pieces. But I have kind of taken it as a sign to be a little more transparent with like, look at all these cool photos. Also, there are these really shitty days in between all of this that I'm going to talk about too, because like that's just how it goes. Like athletes are not perfect humans. Like I guarantee you, like you guys have talked to very famous athletes, and I guarantee you they have really low days also. And they're just humans, fast ones, but humans.
We're all just
Absolutely.
human. That's for sure.
Damaged and fast and
Yeah.
full
Or
of
slow,
mistakes.
either way.
Or
And all of it.
So
That's
I
so
think
true.
the last thing I want to kind of tell people is like, definitely, if you don't follow Sarah currently on social, do follow her. Just do a quick search in IG for Sarah Sturm. She comes up right away. Verified account, if I remember correctly. And I mean, it's worth following. She's worth following for sure. She always has a good perspective on things. But also, I'm really interested in seeing what challenge you do decide to take on. So I know I will be following, and I encourage all the viewers to follow as well. Encourage her and the challenge she's going to take on. We all could do with a little encouragement, regardless of where you're at. I mean, a kind word goes a long ways.
Yep.
And I think a perfect example is like, I mean, IG or just social in general is a good place to try to be positive and to shift that a bit. But also, if you look at a lot of people that are taking on these Everesting challenges, one of the things that seems to be common about what they're talking about is like getting encouragement from their community. While they're doing these challenges and taking these things on and putting it out there and really getting that feedback from their community has been like a really big motivator for them. I mean, you saw how much encouragement there was for like Ruth Winder going out and doing her effort at Flagstaff,
cool.
and Phil doing his, and Keegan doing his, and like, I mean, there's been a lot of really cool, positive stuff that's come out of that. So,
well, we're social creatures, and I think it is. I know it's kind of cheesy, but like, I mean, I think the biggest reason that we're all in these sports is the community. Like, sure, like pushing ourselves, but then like getting encouragement, or if you fail, getting support. Like, it's so important to be there for each other. And that's, I mean, I've always said, like, it's the people that makes the sport, for me. Like,
And see, on that note, it's like, I just want to continue the conversation. I'm like, we could just keep this going.
Another layer,
Well, another time for sure. And we are gonna have, with everything going on, Wahoo Frontiers, kind of the content campaign that we've been working on, that's still moving forward. But we do have a plan to have an episode with Sarah, and she gets into some low times for sure, and some stories that she hasn't really come completely out with. So look for that. Hopefully this year, if we can all get together and actually.
It'll happen.
It'll happen. It'll definitely.
In some way, shape, or form.
And Sarah, I don't know if you've spoken with Lael yet, but we can put you in contact with Lael. She would be a great resource for anything you're trying to take on. I'd love to hear you guys actually talk and
Lael and I have crossed paths quite a few times.
Good.
She's amazing. I saw her down in Arizona earlier, like right at the brink of the pandemic.
That's right. Yeah, she was down there.
Yep, but she is actually someone that obviously I look up to, with her skills and mental strength and physical strength and all of and being a great human, super kind. So thank you. Yeah, I will. She's awesome.
The two things you guys definitely have in common beyond the bike is an endless smile. That is for sure. There always seems to be a good, genuine smile between the two of you. So
she totally is a smiler.
Yeah, she really is. It brings a lot of joy for sure.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Well, I appreciate you joining today. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your long weekend. Share with us what challenge you're going to take on. Yes. I know we're all interested. So
me too.
and if you just can't get enough Sarah, definitely tune in for her 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time live chat over on Topo Designs. So and give her some love there and ask some more questions. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great
Neal, thanks. Bye, Matt.
See you later. All right. Well, thanks for joining. We went a little long on that one. But of course, having Sarah on is just such a blast. And thanks for those of you that sent some questions over. Reach out to Sarah on Instagram, ask her questions. She's a great resource, and she always likes to engage with people. She really is community minded, and why she fits sort of the Wahooligan persona for Wahoo so well. She pushes herself very hard, but doesn't take herself too seriously either, and kind of knows where to draw that balance. And clearly she spoke to, you know, having a support system that kind of keeps her healthy and keeps her focused. So really, really nice to have Sarah join us today. The last thing I'll say is come back on Monday. Bobby and Cancellara doing a live workout with Coach Neal, and then Q&A next Friday. And then next week is the last week for us on these Wahoo All-In live streams. We may bring this back. I think we may change the model a little bit later in the summer, maybe into the fall. But definitely come in for next week. It's the final week. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Stay healthy, stay happy, and we'll catch you on Monday.